My name is Sharon Tan, and I'm the McVeigh Associate Professor of Christian Ethics, and I'm here to introduce our speaker for this afternoon session, Professor Eleazar Fernandez. Professor Eleazar Fernandez is the Professor of Constructive Theology here at United Theological Seminary. And I want to tell you that he may look like a mild-mannered professor. But underneath that suit and those glasses is a very brave explorer and adventurer. First, although he was born and grew up in the sunny Philippines, he came here with a young family to get a PhD from Vanderbilt. Do you know how dangerous it is for foreign students, international students, to come to the United States? After Vanderbilt, moving progressively north, he came to Minnesota and has survived here in the land of frozen lakes, tundra, and prairie now for 20 years. And after the sprinter that we are still having, he's still here. Second, being a professor here is actually one of the less adventurous things he is currently doing. Professor Fernandez is a preeminent scholar, author, and editor. He's considered a leader in the field of Asian and Asian American theology, and in the forefront of globalization and ecclesiology. His fifth book, Burning Center, Porous Borders, published last year, was on the global church. And we recently celebrated his sixth book, New Overtures, which is an edited volume on the future of Asian American theology. Third, as I move up in terms of how brave Professor Fernandez is that he's a prophet. He's a widely known speaker on globalization, social justice, and human rights. His is not only an academic passion in theology, it is a prophetic passion for God's work in the world towards social justice and human flourishing. Fourth, Professor Fernandez is also a highly regarded theological educator. He has taught in various continents, North and South America, Africa, and Asia. He's a consultant for the Association of Theological Schools to projects and to seminaries both in the US and in other parts of the world, where he incorporates his concerns for social justice and the global church. He has a seventh book coming out very soon, an edited volume on diversity and the future of theological education. Fifth, and increasing on the scale of courage and adventure, Professor Fernandez is an activist. He is active both here and in the Philippines for the cause of democracy and human rights for Philippine workers and immigrants. And if I told you any more, I would get him into trouble, so I'll stay right there. Last but not least, Professor Fernandez is a family man. Perhaps the most telling of his courage and integrity, his adventure and explorer status, is the fact that he has managed to do all this while putting his wife through medical school, the same wife who put him through theological school, raising two daughters and putting them through college, all on a seminary professor's salary. I'm most honored to be able to present to you Professor Eleazar Fernandez.
Thank you, Sharon. That was a great introduction. One of my main reasons to come to Minnesota is to go ice fishing. And I did during my first year. Thank you so much for this privilege to be with you this afternoon, and for the privilege of working here at United. I came in 1993, and this year is 2013. That means not too long ago, 2 decades of teaching here at United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities. The title of my speech or presentation this afternoon, which is a different version than what is circulated, is basically when a compelling story finds its home among the people. Then 3 dots, watch out. That's more exciting, I think. Let me start with a Hasidic tale. One year, in an isolated kingdom, the grain harvest turns poisonous. Everyone who eats it will become mad. Yet there is no food available. Finally, the king turns to a trusted servant or counselor and said, "We must all eat or we will die. But you try to eat less. Preserve your sanity to enable you to remind us through the long, dark period ahead that we are mad. Tell us again and again that time will come when we are sane again." The king seemed to be a wise person. He assigned someone whose task is to remind him and the people during the long, dark period ahead that they are mad. But I think he underestimated the gravity of the situation. I doubt if people would easily listen to a prophet once madness reigns. One of the desert fathers, Abba Anthony, said, "The time is coming when people will be insane. And when they see someone who is not insane, they will attack that person saying, 'You are insane because you are not like us.'" Metaphorically speaking, there is something in our daily meal that is promoting social madness. There is toxin in the air we are breathing that is causing social insanity. While we can celebrate our easy access to news and ideas, we are also all the more exposed to a daily dose of social toxins. As usual, Mark Twain has a quip for us. If we do not read, we are uninformed. If we read, we are misinformed. When 2/3 of today's newspapers are monopolies, what can you expect? An independent press, that third pillar of US democracy, is under threat from media oligopoly. And when journalism goes, so goes democracy. In its present form, this media growth, says Bill Myers, has one obvious consequence. There is more information and easier access to it, but it's more narrow in content and perspective, so that what we see from the couch is overwhelmingly a view from the top. This view from the top is the perspective that saturates the airwaves and major media outlets. And it is invested in promoting a certain story. Not surprisingly, with its control of the major media outlets, the story or narrative that comes from this view has become the dominant story that our society lives by. When we are living in the middle of the story, it is easy to believe that this is the only story, the only reality and the way things are. We can just imagine how crucial it is to have this story become the accepted story of our lives. The one who controls the story controls the children. Isn't it? What is this story? Though there are many, there is one story that has gained the status of a meta-narrative and an aura of divinity. This is the story of progress. The core assumptions of this story are: continued economic growth is essential for prosperity. Nature is a commodity that is waiting to be used. Increased consumption is critical to stimulate the economy. And the main plot of the narrative is to get ahead. And those who are left behind are responsible for their own plight. Every day, we are inundated with stories that the only way to move forward is to pursue economic growth, and at least in the United States of America, to protect the American way of life. Everyone, communities of color, indigenous communities, women, will have the chance to improve their lot if they just work hard and play by the rules. Right? The system is open and fair. There is nothing wrong with it. The United States is the best nation state in the world, right? The best nation state in the world. And those who criticize it are just envious of its progress. If you don't agree with this, you must not be truly American. Even those among who have fallen by the wayside may still continue to believe in the story of progress, and ironically are avid defenders of it. Why? Why? Because those who have fallen by the wayside continue to believe or to continue to adopt these upwardly mobile values and religious orientation of those above them because of their tenacious belief that in the end their dream will save them. Why should I change the system? That's my aspiration. Got it? The novel by Victor Hugo, Les Miserables, which has become a Broadway musical and film, may help clarify the narrative or story of progress I have tried to articulate. Les Miserables has a character in the name of Javert, right? Who embodies the values and mindset of those who continue to believe in the story of progress or the narrative of success, and those who believe that their success is based solely on their efforts and in playing by the rules. Yes, many have failed according to this measure of success, but that's not the fault of the story. The problem lies among those who have failed. They are weak and defective in character. Javert speaks for those who believe in the sacrality, infallibility, and inviolability of the economic order, whose logic is reward and fortune for those considered deserving, not grace and mercy for those deemed slackers. Grace and mercy have no place in the story that Javert lives by. Javert heard the cries of the poor, and he was so engrossed in his self-righteous certainty that he remained indifferent to the cries of the poor. Javert sings, "I have heard such protestations every day for 20 years. Let's have no more explanations. Save your breath and save your tears. Honest work, just reward. That's the way to please the Lord." So what can we expect from this dominant story? The path that this story suggests is more of the same, please. The story follows the script of business as usual. There is tinkering here and there, rhetoric of change we can believe in here and there, but what we are getting is more of the same. Expect bailouts here and there, but the actions basically boil down to rearranging the to rearrange the furniture of the sinking Titanic. All these end up protecting the bottom line and the interest of the bigs, those considered too big to fail. So what are the outcomes of following the dominant story, of doing more of the same and of business as usual? The story of business as usual leads to the story of what Joanna Macy and others call the sad story of our societal great unraveling. We are witnessing societal unraveling not only in other parts of the world, but also in our immediate neighborhood, right here in Minnesota. The evangelists of the dominant story have made people believe that it will lift all boats. Quite the contrary, instead of lifting all boats, it's lifting all yachts. And worse, the poor do not even have boats, and they are drowning in the tsunami of corporate profits. Worse still, the money that could be used to save people's lives is used to bail out corporations that have amassed huge profits while the little ones go down the societal sinkhole. And as economic disparity heightens, so the social inequality widens, and democracy, which we thought we had, has all the more been undermined. We are witnessing the unraveling of our democratic processes as people continue to experience more and more economic disempowerment. We cannot and should not separate political economy from economic democracy, or separate political democracy from economic democracy. If democracy does not happen in the workplace, the place where many of us spend most of our time working, then there is no democracy anywhere. Yet this is an aspect that is oftentimes forgotten in most discourse about democracy. If there is no democracy in the way we organize our economic life, there is not going to be democracy anywhere. The interest of the 99% will always be frustrated in favor of the interest of the 1%. We are witnessing the breakdown of various communities and the diminishment of social capital as inequality widens, violence increases, and walls of division spread. The breakdown of communities is self-reinforcing. Self-reinforcing. The more people retreat into their own private worlds, the more neighborhoods decline, and more people turn away from community involvement. Then the vicious cycle continues until it is interrupted and changed. When people retreat into their private lives, something terrible happens. A private space is important. Yet there is an irony that we should not fall. The Latin root for the word private is privare, which means to deprive or to be deprived of. Imagine depriving oneself of the richness, of the encounter and potential growth and transformation in an ethnically, culturally, religiously diverse context. It is not a surprise that the Greek word for a strictly private person is idiotes, from which we derive the term idiot, someone who does or says something stupid. We will become idiots if we don't engage in the public discourse. When the stories a society shares are out of tune with its circumstances, they can become self-limiting, even a threat to survival. This is our situation, says David Corton, author of The Great Turning. and you talk about the great emergence. Okay. A growing number has realized that the dominant story we have been living by for quite some time has become a threat to our very survival and is greatly responsible for our social unraveling. But the dominant story continues to have its believers and defenders. When the forces of newness and the forces of reaction collide, crisis emerges. The crisis, says Antonio Gramsci, Italian political activist, consists precisely in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be born. In this interregnum, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear. They are appearing. We need to welcome, articulate, and promote another powerful, compelling, life-giving story if we are to end the story of our destructive social unraveling. We must help give birth to a new story if we are to give birth to a new tomorrow. Others call this life-giving story the Great Turning, which includes 3 dimensions: shift in consciousness, life-sustaining systems and practices, and holding actions to defend and promote life. The story of the Great Turning is already happening. The story of the Great Turning is, in the first place, about a shift in consciousness and a new way of understanding reality. We need a new consciousness that sees our challenges not simply as problems that need technical fixed, but as adaptive challenges that demand creative responses. As Albert Einstein puts it, no problem can be solved by the same level of consciousness that created it. Right? It is ironic that people expect something new by using the same consciousness or while doing business as usual. It sounds like insanity, isn't it? Someone defined insanity as doing the same thing over and over again while expecting a different result. And if you are familiar here, because you are from Minnesota, if you lick a frozen post once, you are ignorant. But if you lick it again and again, you are stupid. Moreover, the Great Turning shift in consciousness is about how people view themselves in relation to the wider world. It is about belonging in the wider web of life. It is about interdependence. It is about justice or right relation, openness and hospitality, dialogue and mutual respect, care and compassion, worth and dignity, and sustainability. It is about access to resources that sustains life. It is as well about option for the least, not because they are morally better than the wealthy and the mighty, but because they are dying before their time. And let no one imagine that they hear the voice of God clearer when they turn a deaf ear to the cries of the world, says Nathan Soderblom. Moreover, option for the least is taken because the one who has called us to be a disciple has opted not only to be with those who are marginalized, but has become marginalized himself. Jesus said, "Truly I say to you, as you did it to the least of these my brethren, you did it to me." When we find a good story and fully give ourselves to it, that story can act through us, breathing new life into everything we do. says Johanna Macy. The story of the Great Turning is such a great story. It is a story that must find a home in every heart. It must find home in our communities. When it finds home among individuals and communities, it provides a compelling vision, a value orientation, and energy for organizing and mobilizing people to action, for action. When a compelling, life-giving story finds a home among individuals and communities, it stirs them from the inside and calls them to action. And when people are grasped by a compelling, life-giving story, they experience something that wants to be born, which only the concerted action of a social movement can give birth. Social movements are a natural home for any great life-giving story. Social movements are movements that have been grasped and empowered by a compelling and life-giving story. A great story needs a social movement, and a social movement needs a great story. Social movements are vehicles for embodying a great story. They are fragile in their fragile forms, but they are vehicles of God's radical love. Social movements are instruments for practicing hope. Practicing hope. They provide opportunities to experience hope. When dreams are betrayed many times, it is difficult to move forward. Someone said, it's not so much that people are afraid of change or so in love with the old ways, but it's that place in between that people fear. It's like being between trapezes. There's nothing to hold on to. Social movements provide something for people to hold on to. Social movements remain as movements when they continue to be guided by a great story that embodies vision, values, and aspirations. It is only in relation to the larger story, to a larger vision and set of values, that they maintain their true north. Only those who know one's true north and destination know how to make principled compromises. As the Roman philosopher Seneca once said, without knowing one's port of destination, no wind is favorable. We have heard of interest as an important factor in organizing and mobilizing people to action. While we may not be able to totally dismiss interest as a factor in organizing, I believe, along with others, that it is not sufficient. And I think this is shared by Isaiah Group. It does not have the power of shared story and values to unite various groups. When I look back at the history of labor movements in the Hawaiian sugarcane and pineapple plantation, I see how one ethnic group was used to quell the labor strike of another. Sing as we may of the unity of workers around the world, labor unions in the United States of America had been among the staunch oppositionists to migrant labor. And think of the instances when the interest of labor unions collided with that of the environmentalists. Many times. There are many differences that can divide or can be used to divide us. There are struggles identified as identity politics, race and ethnicity, sexuality, gender, religion, etc. For me, politics of identity is not the problem. On the contrary, Politics of identity expands our notion of justice, an understanding of justice not simply predicated on the notion of sameness. What is crucial is that movements that are identified primarily with identity struggles must work with other movements on shared concerns, such as LGBT addressing immigration and poverty, and that immigration movements supporting LGBT struggles, if we are to build trust and cooperation. Only a great story which weaves the plight of each and names the interconnection can overcome the limitations of organizing based on interest. It is only in being part of a larger story in which vision, values, and aspirations are shared that organizing can overcome what is called issue silos. Organizing based on shared values, says Marshall Gans, invites people to move beyond issue silos. Values-based approach to organizing makes an appeal to our shared humanity, especially not just in terms of ideas, but in terms of what we are concerned about, how we feel, what are those things that we are afraid. It appeals to our basic humanity. We know that it is values, not just interest, that move people to get involved in the political life. We act on our values, on what we care about, not just on self-interest. Great social movements that are guided by life-giving vision and values are best able to avoid falling into piecemeal pragmatism. I heard about this, especially with Isaiah Group and Steve Newcomb, about learning to cut issues. Learning to cut issues that are winnable, for me, however, should not be equated with piecemeal pragmatism. It is true that it's important to win issues. It empowers people and it engenders hope. But when a social movement is guided by a larger story, it addresses issues that may not have easy, calculable result because it involves paradigm shift or change of the story. That's very hard to assess. Great social movements approach politics not simply as the science of the possible, but of enlarging what is possible and of making those that have been considered impossible come within the range of the possible. Given our story and our globalized context, with its heightening complexity and diversity, great social movements must be ethnically and racially diverse, must be local, ecumenical, and interfaith. Given the changing demographics of our place and the role that communities of color play in politics, you have observed that. Great social movements must take the presence of those people seriously. The great social movements of our time must see the local in relation to the global, or see themselves and reality globally. Protest against the war in Afghanistan is important. And there is no need to make any public rhetoric about how we love the Afghan people, because it is a good thing to do for us in the first place and for them as well. If we don't spend our resources on waging war, we'll have more funds for our schools and communities and healthcare. Faith communities have much to contribute to the articulation, propagation, and promotion of life-giving story or stories. At the core of the Christian faith is a story of God's saving love and radical hospitality. Even that formulaic articulation of the triune God in the historic Christian creeds is at its heart a story. Trinity is not about number. He or she who still counts does not understand Trinity. Trinity is the greatest love story, God's love story. It is the story of the one who loves, liberates, and reconciles. Faith communities, even as they have become institutionalized, are at their core faith-based movements and bearers of life-giving story. When faithful to their mission, they can become bearers of a new and life-giving tomorrow for the wider society. And as part of civil society, faith communities can multiply their presence and power for social change when they merge their vision, their values, their skills, and resources with other movements for social transformation. The dream and desire to help usher in a new tomorrow will always find resistance from various fronts. It is easy to be intimidated by the mere mention of enormous challenges. So the soil is fertile for despair and cynicism. You have heard of this maybe. Cynicism can easily replace lousy optimism. The word cynic comes from the Greek word kun, K-U-O-N, or dog. A cynic is a person who barks in public and urinates on the leg of a table. There are certainly thousands of reasons to pee and poop in the halls of power. But cynicism is not our vehicle for birthing a new tomorrow. Where do I see seeds of hope? I see seeds of hope in the groaning, greening, socially conscious, and empowered individuals who have decided to join the organized and mobilized multitude to make our societal institutions serve the common good. I see seeds of hope among faith communities that dare to act in hope that another world is possible and stake their case along with others in the pursuit of alternative politics. The only antidote to the power of organized money is organized people. The awakened and empowered people have no choice but to confront the powers that be. We are familiar with Frederick Douglass' warning. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, it never will. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those they oppress. Yes, people's endurance is critical, but it is not enough. Social movements need to be politically savvy about power, especially in the face of oppositions. As Anthony Giddens put it, power may be defined as the capacity to secure outcomes where the realization of these outcomes depends upon the agency of others. Power in political community is, in this one respect, like power in a chess game. What constitutes an effective move depends on what the other player will do thereafter. Right? Without a doubt, the corporate globalized power is monstrous and complex. It is easy for one to be intimidated. One may argue, if everything is connected, then you can't change anything without changing everything. But you can change anything, so that means you can change. But you can change everything, so that means you can change anything, right? If everything is connected, then you can change anything without changing everything. But you can change everything, so that means you can change anything. There is, however, a different, if not a hopeful, reading of our globalized interconnections. Because we are widely spread and connected, we have more and varied opportunities to be that real pain in the rear of predatory capitalism and force it to change. Perhaps too much is being asked of you, of us. Too much is being asked of us frail human beings who have many urgent things to attend to, but who also have physical limitations. Perhaps that is true. But now I am going to ask you one more thing. I would like you to stand up. And I would like you to turn to the nearest person beside you and look that person in the eye and shake hands. And tell that person you are not alone. Now turn to the other side. Look that person in the eye and shake hands. Tell that person you are not alone. Now look around. Now you know you are surrounded by kindred spirits. Hold your neighbor's presence and keep reminding yourself, I am not alone. I am part of a movement. Joining a social movement is not only a political necessity, it is a spiritual necessity. I use this quote from Thich Nhat Hanh many times. If we are a drop of water and we try to get to the ocean as only an individual drop, we will surely evaporate along the way. To arrive at the ocean, we must go as a river. The social movement is our river. So, people of the new tomorrow, the awakened and empowered multitude, let us go as a movement to remember the dismembered and the broken and resurrect the dead in our daily living. Let us go as a movement to topple tyranny of various sorts and restore global democracy where we can, when we can, while we can, until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness an ever-flowing stream. Thank you so much. Hallelujah.